Viruses are some of the smallest infectious agents we know, yet they can completely take over a living cell, shutting down its normal functions and turning it into a virus-producing factory. They can cause anything from a mild cold to cancer, lifelong infections, or global pandemics, all without being truly alive in the traditional sense. So how do they do it? Hi, and welcome back to my channel, Learning Biology with Dr. Vanessa, where I take difficult biological concepts and make them easy to understand. In this video, we're going to walk step by step through the viral life cycle, exploring how viruses attach to cells, enter them, replicate, and spread, and how these processes explain everything from tissue specificity to cell damage, latency, and disease. Viruses multiply through a process called replication, but this only happens inside a living host cell. The general steps of replication include adsorption, which is when the virus attaches to a specific receptor on the host cell's surface. This step is highly specific. If a cell does not have the correct receptor, the virus cannot attach or enter. For example, HIV can only infect cells that have the CD4 receptor, which is found on certain immune cells like T helper cells. Influenza viruses bind to receptors on respiratory epithelial cells, which is why they primarily infect the airways. SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, attaches to the ACE2 receptor found in the lungs, intestines, and other tissues. This specificity explains why viruses can only infect certain cell types or tissues, a concept known as tropism, which I introduced in the last video. In short, if a cell does not have the right receptor, that virus simply can't get in. Next comes penetration and uncoating. After adsorption, the virus or its genetic material enters the host cell. This process is called penetration. Some viruses can fuse directly with the cell membrane, while others are taken in within a vesicle through endocytosis and then broken down by enzymes. Once inside, uncoating can occur where the viral capsid is removed, releasing the viral nucleic acid into the cytoplasm. The synthesis phase follows, where the virus hijacks the host cell's machinery to make new viral components. The exact details of this step vary depending on the type of viral genome, since DNA and RNA viruses use different strategies to express their genes. As an example, in double-stranded DNA viruses, synthesis typically occurs in two stages. During the early phase, viral DNA is transcribed into RNA using the host cell's enzymes, and these RNA molecules are then translated into regulatory proteins. In the late phase, the viral genome is replicated, and large amounts of structural proteins, such as capsid proteins, are produced in preparation for assembly. RNA viruses handle synthesis differently because host cells cannot directly copy or translate RNA genomes in the same way as DNA. Many RNA viruses must carry their own RNA-dependent RNA polymerase to copy their genome, while others, such as retroviruses, first convert their RNA into DNA using reverse transcriptase before host enzymes can be used. During assembly, those newly made viral genomes and proteins come together to form complete virus particles. And then finally, maturation and release occur as those new virions exit the host cell. This process often damages or kills the cell. Enveloped viruses typically acquire their envelope from the host cell membrane as they leave through a process called budding. Non-enveloped viruses are more likely to cause cell lysis. The number of virions released varies widely by virus. Some animal viruses may release only a few dozen new virions, while others can produce hundreds or even thousands per cell, as seen with viruses like influenza or poliovirus. This variation depends on the virus's replication strategy and the overall health and resources of the host cell. Viral infections can damage host cells in several ways. The newly formed viruses can cause direct cell destruction as they burst out of the cell. The virus also disrupts normal cell function by redirecting the cell's resources towards making viral components instead of doing its usual job. This damage caused by the virus that would change the cell's microscopic appearance is referred to as cytopathic effects. Sometimes the damage isn't caused by the virus itself, but by the body's immune response. A strong immune reaction meant to eliminate infected cells can also injure surrounding tissues. In many infections, the accumulated damage eventually kills the infected cells. However, not all viral infections follow this rapid destructive pattern. Some viruses establish persistent infections, where the virus remains in the cell without immediately killing it. These infections can last for weeks, years, or even the lifetime of the host. The virus can remain latent in the cytoplasm of the host cell or be known as a provirus. A provirus is a persistent infection in which the viral DNA becomes integrated into the host cell's DNA. This is characteristic of retroviruses. Once integrated, the viral genome may remain hidden for long periods, especially in cells like neurons, while slowly causing damage and loss of function over time. Other viruses enter a chronic latent state, where they remain inactive within cells and produce no new virus particles. Later, under certain triggers, such as stress, illness, or immune suppression, the virus can periodically reactivate. Classic examples include herpes simplex virus, which causes cold sores and genital herpes, and varicella zoster virus, which causes chicken pox initially and then can later reactivate as shingles or herpes zoster virus. Some viruses, known as oncoviruses, have the ability to permanently alter the genetic material of their host cells, which can ultimately lead to cancer. These oncogenic viruses can cause cancer through several different mechanisms. In some cases, the virus carries genes that directly cause cancer. In other cases, the virus produces proteins that interfere with the cell's normal growth regulating pathways. This removes the cell's natural quality control that usually keeps cell division in check. Cells that have been altered in this way are described as transformed. Transformed cells divide more rapidly than normal, often show changes in their chromosomes, and may even display altered surface molecules. They also have the ability to divide for an indefinite period of time. These are features that are characteristic of cancer cells. Examples of oncogenic viruses include human papillomavirus, HPV, which is linked to cervical and other cancers, hepatitis B virus, which is associated with liver cancer, and Epstein-Barr virus, which is linked to certain lymphomas. Now let's shift to another important group of viruses called bacteriophages, or simply phages. These are viruses that specifically infect bacteria. Bacteriophages are incredibly important in microbiology. Not only do they help regulate bacterial populations in nature, but they can also make certain bacteria more dangerous to humans by transferring genes that increase virulence or antibiotic resistance. They also play a major role in gene exchange between bacteria and in shaping entire microbial ecosystems. The most well-studied bacteriophages are those that infect Escherichia coli, known as the T-even phages. These include T2, T4, and T6. T-even phages have a very distinctive structure, an icosahedral DNA-containing head, and a complex tail apparatus that is helical and made of many components. Because bacteria have rigid cell walls, bacteriophages cannot enter the cell by endocytosis or membrane fusion like animal viruses. Instead, they infect bacteria through a stepwise process that involves injecting their genetic material directly into the cell. The phage first uses its tail fibers to recognize and bind to specific receptors on the bacterial surface. These receptors are often components of the outer membrane, such as lipopolysaccharides or membrane proteins, and this interaction determines which bacterial species the phage can infect. Once attached, the phage injects its DNA through the tail tube into the bacterial cytoplasm. The capsid itself remains outside the cell, only the nucleic acid enters. After injection, the bacterial cell's normal DNA replication and protein synthesis are shut down, and the host machinery is redirected toward viral replication and the production of viral proteins. At this point, the phage can follow one of two pathways, the Lytic cycle or the lysogenic cycle. In the Lytic cycle, the virus rapidly replicates inside the bacterium, assembling many new phage particles. Eventually, the bacterial cell bursts or lyses, releasing the newly formed phages to infect neighboring cells. Some bacteriophages, known as temperate phages, instead enter the lysogenic cycle. In this pathway, the viral DNA integrates into the bacterial chromosome as a prophage and remains dormant. Each time the bacterium divides, it copies and passes on the viral DNA along with its own genetic material. This can continue for many generations without harming the host cell. Lysogeny is especially important in medicine because it allows phages to transfer harmful genes between bacteria. Occasionally, the prophage becomes activated in a process called induction, triggering viral replication and entry into the Lytic cycle. When a bacterium gains new traits, such as toxin production, due to the presence of a prophage, this is called lysogenic conversion. Several major bacterial toxins are the result of lysogenic conversion. For example, Corynebacterium diphtheriae produces diphtheria toxin, Vibrio cholerae produces cholera toxin, and Clostridium botulinum produces botulinum toxin, but only when these bacteria carry their specific prophages. Without the phage, these bacteria are far less harmful. Not all non-cellular infectious agents fit the traditional definition of a virus. Some are even simpler, lacking many or all of the structures we usually associate with life. These are known as non-cellular infectious agents, and they include prions, satellite viruses, and viroids. Prions are the most unusual of all. They are infectious proteins with no nucleic acid, meaning they have no DNA and no RNA. Instead of carrying genetic instructions, prions cause disease by triggering normal proteins in the host to misfold. These misfolded proteins accumulate in the nervous tissue and lead to fatal neurodegenerative diseases such as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, mad cow disease, and Kuru. Satellite viruses are incomplete viruses that cannot replicate on their own. They require a helper virus to provide missing functions. A classic example is the hepatitis D virus, or Delta agent, which can only infect cells already infected with hepatitis B virus. While small, satellite viruses can significantly worsen disease severity when paired with their helper virus. Viroids are the simplest known infectious agents. They consist solely of short, circular, naked strands of RNA and infect plants, not humans. Viroids lack a capsid and do not code for proteins, yet they can disrupt normal cellular processes and cause serious agricultural disease. While they are not clinically relevant to human health, viroids help illustrate just how minimal an infectious agent can be. Treating viral infections presents unique challenges. Because viruses are not bacteria, antibiotics are completely ineffective against them. They target bacterial structures that viruses simply don't have. Viruses also rely heavily on the host cell's machinery to replicate, which makes it difficult to design treatments that harm the virus without also damaging the host cells. Antiviral drugs do exist, but they often work by interfering with viral replication or with host cell processes the virus depends on. As a result, antivirals can sometimes cause significant side effects, and they tend to be more specific to certain viruses rather than broad spectrum. Because of these challenges, modern medicine places a strong emphasis on prevention rather than treatment when it comes to viral diseases. This is why vaccines play such a central role in controlling viral infections, and why many of the most effective vaccines we have target viruses rather than bacteria. If you found the content of this video helpful and want to keep learning how microbes affect the body, please make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and turn on notifications so that you never miss out on new content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.